4 servings, 225 grams of beef, a pot that ran for days without ever going cold. In 1933, unemployment sat at 25%. Families across America were feeding themselves on almost nothing. Ground beef was among the cheapest sources of meat. Even that was precious. A household that could stretch 200 grams of beef into 4 full bowls of stew and then run that same pot for another 2 days was not cooking well. It was surviving intelligently. What those families built was not a recipe. It was a system. 1 pot, 1 fire, brought to a full boil every morning, added to when something was available, eaten from whenever the family was hungry. I am going to show you how to build it today, but do not skip the resting step near the end. Skip it and you serve a bowl that tastes like the ingredients never met each other. Stay with it and the whole pot becomes something else entirely. One thing before any of this starts. If using dried beans, they go into cold water tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. Use a bowl large enough to give the beans room. They absorb water and swell to almost double their dry size overnight. Not enough water and the top layer stays partially dry and cooks unevenly the next day. Cover them completely, then add another 2 centimeters on top of that. Dried beans soaked overnight soften evenly through the cook and release starch into the broth as they go, doing the thickening work without any flour or added agent. Straight into the pot without soaking, they stay chalky in the center no matter how long the stove runs. 1 step the night before. That is the only preparation this recipe requires. The next day, 1 tablespoon of fat or drippings into a heavy pot over medium heat. 1 large onion chopped into the pot. Cook it until lightly golden, 5 to 8 minutes. Do not rush this stage. The onion needs to reach golden, not pale, not translucent, golden. Pale onion added to water tastes raw in the finished broth, no matter how long the stew simmers. Raw onion added straight to water gives a sharp, uncooked flavor that never integrates. Onion cooked to golden becomes sweet. That sweetness is the base note of the entire broth. Stir every 2 minutes and keep the heat steady. If the edges are catching before the center has colored, drop the heat slightly and give it more time. 225 grams of ground beef, directly into the onion. Break it up immediately. Do not let it sit as one mass in the pan or the outside browns while the center steams. Use a wooden spoon or spatula to break it into small, even pieces as it hits the heat. Medium-high heat. Cook until browned all the way through, no pink remaining. The browning on the beef is the same flavor-based principle as the onion. Those caramelized surfaces dissolve into the broth during the long simmer and give the liquid its depth. Pale steamed beef gives pale, thin broth. Do not drain the fat. Leave everything in the pot. That rendered fat is the flavor vehicle for the whole stew. The beans absorb it over the next 2 hours. By the end, every bean carries the taste of the beef, even though the ratio of meat to bulk is very low. A small amount of meat flavoring an entire pot. That is how 4 people ate from 225 grams. 2 carrots, diced. 2 medium potatoes, diced. The soaked and drained beans, all into the pot. Stir everything so the vegetables and beans coat in the fat and browned meat at the bottom. Give it a full minute of stirring. Every surface of every bean and every piece of vegetable should have contact with the fat before the water goes in. That coating is what carries the beef flavor into the bulk of the stew from the very start of the simmer. Look at the ratio right now. A thin layer of beef surrounded by a much larger volume of vegetables and beans. That is what it is supposed to look like. The beans and potatoes are not filler. They carry the beef flavor as the stew builds. By the time it is done, the distinction between the meat and the bulk disappears. The whole pot tastes like beef stew. 1 to 1.2 liters of water into the pot. Bring to a full boil. Then reduce to the absolute lowest setting, lid on. 1.5 to 2 hours. Do not rush it. The beans absorb the fat and meat juices dissolved in the water. The potatoes break down at the edges and release starch into the broth, thickening it naturally without any flour, without anything added. The carrots go tender. The separate components stop being separate. Check the pot every 30 minutes. The liquid should be barely moving, an occasional bubble breaking the surface, nothing more. A hard simmer pushes the liquid out of the pot faster than the beans can absorb it, and the broth finishes thin instead of thick. If the simmer is running too hard, drop the heat and leave the lid slightly ajar to let some of the steam escape without losing too much liquid. Low heat only. At 90 minutes, press a bean between 2 fingers. No chalkiness means it is done. Still firm, give it 30 more minutes. Do not move to the next step until the beans yield completely. A bean with any resistance left in the center will not finish softening during the resting step. While the pot works, do you keep dried beans at home right now? Lentils, chickpeas, anything dry stored? Drop it in the comments. This is the step I warned you about at the start. What happens in the next 30 minutes determines the bowl. Salt and black pepper to taste. Start with less than you think you need. The broth has been concentrating for 2 hours and carries more salt from the beef than it did at the start. Taste first, then season. If tomato paste is available, 1 tablespoon stirred in now. It was not always part of this historically. When it is there, it adds a slight acidic depth that rounds out the richness of the broth. When it is not, the stew stands entirely on its own. Salt goes in after the full simmer, not before. Salt added to beans early can tighten their skins and extend cooking time significantly. Season at the end only. Lid back on, off the heat or at the lowest setting. 30 minutes. No stirring, no opening. The beans continue absorbing flavor from the broth. The potato starch continues thickening the liquid. The whole pot settles. A bowl served immediately out of the simmer tastes good. A bowl served after 30 minutes tastes like it has been built twice as long. The beans that have been releasing starch outward during the simmer begin pulling the flavor-saturated broth back inward. The result is a bean that has absorbed the broth rather than just sitting in it. That is the difference between a bowl that tastes like beans with beef broth and a bowl that tastes like beef stew. Depression-era cooks understood this. They never served straight from the boil. For modern storage, refrigerate in an airtight container for 3 to 4 days. Freeze portions for up to 3 months. Reheat to a full boil each time. The stew improves on day 2. The beans absorb more overnight and the broth thickens further. What was good the first evening is better the next morning. Ladle it into a bowl. The broth is thick, not from flour, not from anything added to make it thick, from the potatoes breaking down over 2 hours and the beans absorbing everything the beef released. Those are the only thickening agents in this pot. The meat has distributed itself through the entire stew. You are not finding pieces of beef. You are tasting it in every spoonful of beans and every bite of potato. I take a spoonful of the broth on its own. It is dense and deeply savory, the kind of flavor that should not come from this ingredient list. The beans carry the beef. The broth coats the spoon. Nothing in that bowl tastes like it came from almost nothing. Here is the detail that makes this recipe different from everything else on this channel. Depression-era families did not make this once and eat until it was gone. They ran a perpetual pot. The pot stayed on the stove or in the coolest spot in the house. every morning and every evening, brought to a full boil for several minutes. Water added when it thickened too much. A spare potato, an extra handful of beans, any leftover dropped in when there was something to add. That system fed the household for 2 to 4 days from a single cook. Each day, the broth absorbed more from whatever went in the night before. Each reheating built on the last. The pot on day 3 tasted nothing like the pot on day 1, and day 3 was always better. 225 grams of beef, 1 cup of dried beans, 4 people fed for 2 to 4 days. A pot that gets better every time it is reheated. Tell me in the comments, what forgotten recipe do you want me to bring back next?